What is Easter all about? How do we understand Easter? Have you ever asked yourself that, or is it just me? Like, what is Easter actually really all about? I mean, if we've been around church kind of any length of time, we know that Easter isn't really, well, it isn't about, chocolate eggs and bunnies. We know that Easter is about Jesus dying on the cross and coming back to life again to save us. But why? Why did Jesus have to die? Again, if we've been a Christian even for a little while, we might answer by saying, Jesus had to die to pay for my sins. But who is he paying, and why do they want someone to die? But a bigger problem with that answer by itself, I feel, is that often the cross then becomes merely a legal transaction. I had to pay a fine, but Jesus steps in and pays it for me. As if our only problem was really a legal technicality. I commit the crime, but Jesus does the time. Is that how the Bible describes the cross? And so, if that is what all the cross did, then what is the resurrection for? If it was the death of Jesus that freed us, that paid this transaction, why did Jesus need to come back to life at all? And often people will say, well, the resurrection proves he was God. It proves he really did do what he said he did on the cross. But again, if it's only that, doesn't that reduce the resurrection simply to kind of like a ta-da, like at the end of a magic trick? Look, really did it. Is the resurrection just a proof? And if it's just a proof, why wait till the third day? Like, one day would have been long enough to prove you were dead. I mean, come to think of it, what was Jesus doing on that middle day? Didn't he just kind of pop back up home to the Father? 24 hours, put his feet up. Well done, son, have a bit of a break, before he came back down to spend just like another 40 days to prove what he'd done? Well, I think therein lies the question. You see, I think Easter, the way we often talk about it, is missing a crucial part of the story. We're taught in school, aren't we, boys and girls? If you do a story at school, what are you told? The main components of a story are the beginning, the middle, and the end. You need all three parts to tell the story. But in Easter, often the way we talk about it, I think we've been missing the middle. We have the cross and we have the resurrection. But what happened in between? I believe once we answer that question, both the cross and the resurrection actually make a lot more sense. What was Jesus doing in between? Well, he was dealing with death. He was dealing with the devil. And we read about it earlier on in our service in Psalm 24. Psalm 24 is deeply rooted in the religious world of ancient Israel. Psalm 24, as all the Bible is written into a context. It is a response to, the claims of the devil. It is a response to the claims of other false gods. You see, many of the surrounding nations did not worship Yahweh, did not worship Jesus. And so they had their own stories about claims about who's really in charge and who they should worship. And Psalm 24 is a response to those claims by other religions, by pagans. In fact, Psalm 24 is actually mocking a very specific Canaanite god called Baal. We've heard of Baal before, haven't we? We've spoken about Baal. To the Canaanites, Baal was their most high god. He was like the god above all of the gods, in charge of all of their smaller gods, yeah? The story of Baal, as his worshippers believed it, was essentially this. Baal ascending to the head of the council of gods, fighting and defeating all the other gods, and successfully overthrowing the previous high god. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like anything anyone in the Bible tries to do? It's the devil, right? He tries to overthrow the one true God. He tries to overtake the council of and be head of the angels and head of humanity. He tries to lead a rebellion in heaven. But he doesn't manage to do it, does he? But in his version of the story, he does. His version of the story is called the Baal cycle. You don't need to know that, but I just want you to know that it is a document, a story, an ancient history. In his version, he succeeds. You see, in the ancient world, it was common for official histories written by kings to be heavily, full of propaganda. I mean, maybe not just in the ancient world, hey? Right? They told their histories to make them look better. So they'd write that they actually won battles that they actually lost, that sort of thing. And the Baal cycle is the devil's propaganda document, attempting to spin the devil's defeats into a victory. So I think to really understand Psalm 24, it's going to help for us to understand Baal's little story that he's been telling, this lie that he's been telling. What happens in his story is Baal fights the gods Yam and Nahar. Yam is the sea, and he is the current king over the gods in his little story. And Nahar is the river. He's Yam's son and second in command. Having defeated the Most High God and his son, Baal ascends to the throne of the council, and he builds himself a massive palace. But then there's almost an epilogue to his story where he just mentions at the end, and by the way, then I had this kind of death match with Moat, who is the god of death. And I beat Moat, and so I now also, he says, I've established myself as Lord of the underworld and the dead, and he moves his palace down there. Now, why would he do that? Now, if you know anything about ancient pagan gods, or even, quite frankly, if you've ever watched Disney's Hercules, you will know that none of the gods wanted to be in charge of the dead. That's the worst job to have. It was like cleaning the toilets, yeah? So why does Baal choose to take his palace down there? It's almost as if Baal, the devil, is trying to give a reason for why he's Lord of the dead. Oh yeah, no, I totally chose to be down here. Yeah, no, I love it down here. It's totally what I wanted. I won all the fights, I'm in charge, but I just fancy, being down here. This is my own choosing completely. Are we convinced? Now, of course, we know the real story, don't we? We know that actually the devil was an angel who tried to seize the throne of God and failed. And actually he was thrown down to the earth like lightning to become, all he was given is you can have the underworld. That's all you get, the power of death. But that story doesn't make people want to worship you, does it? So he had to make up another story. And so Psalm 24 is not only praising God, it's trash talk to the devil. He's really going at it. And it begins by affirming that the earth belongs to Yahweh. The earth belongs to the Lord, to Jesus. And it belongs to him because he founded it on the seas, on Yam. He founded it on the rivers, on Nahar. Yeah? Jesus is the one who, in the very beginning, Genesis chapter 1, he defeated the chaotic water, Yam and Nahar, and brought forth order in Genesis chapter 1. The earth belongs to the Lord. And the psalm then continues to describe who is it then who is able to dwell on the mountain of Yahweh, on the mountain of the Lord. Because it's not the devil. He's been cast down. He likes to think he can. So who can? Well, it's humans. Humans who have a clean hands and a pure heart and who don't participate in false worship. It is humans who will receive blessing and life from Jesus. But humans are held captive by death because of our sin. We're held captive by the devil. And so the rest of the psalm describes an assault, an attack by Jesus himself on Baal's palace, on the devil's palace in the underworld to set humans free. I tell you, this is the best psalm ever. It's awesome. You see, in the Baal cycle, this piece of devil propaganda, there's this really critical moment where Baal ascends to power. And he stood in the council of the gods. Yam and Nahar popped out. I don't know where they've gone. But they're not there. And Baal's talking to all the other gods going, come on, follow me. We can take them. I'll be your new God. Come on, let's fight them. And then Yam and Nahar walk back in. And all the other gods are terrified. And they literally put their heads between their knees. And like, oh no, Yam and Nahar are back. And Baal kind of has this like Braveheart moment. You know, or his Aragorn moment, like, fight for me, fight for victory, yeah? And he's like, he says, lift up your heads, O you gods. And then he leads the charge and kills Yam and Nahar. That's his story. And so, in Psalm 24, as Jesus' assault begins on the gates of Baal, on the devil's palace in the underworld, it begins with the words of Baal being used against him in mockery. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? That's the gates replying. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty, the Lord, mighty in battle. I don't know if you've ever read this verse before and really thought about it out of context. It doesn't really make sense, does it? Because gates don't have heads and gates can't talk and ask questions. But when we understand the context, we see that Jesus is using the devil's own words against him. He's mocking the devil's propaganda. You see, just as Baal used those very words to try and get the gods to betray their boss, Jesus now used those words at the gates of hell to get them to betray their boss. Yeah? Because the devil, as Lord of the underworld, has indeed built a palace to keep the dead captive. And it has gates. And we're told in Psalm 107, they're gates of bronze with bars of iron. And whilst they may be strong enough to hold in dead humans, they can't hold Jesus back. He's the King of glory, and he's coming in. Jesus coming in to raid the devil's palace and free humanity. He talks about this in one of his parables where he says, how can you raid the strong man's house unless you first bind him? He binds Satan and he raids his house. This psalm is telling the devil, humans don't belong to you. Not even the dead ones. They're all mine. They still belong to Jesus, the Lord of the earth, and I'm coming to get them. So the devil's story was propaganda. Is Psalm 24 propaganda too? Is it just another nice story? No, it's a prophecy. And it has come true. It has happened. The church has always seen the assault described in Psalm 24 as having taken place in the death and resurrection of Jesus. In fact, many of the church fathers see it as the very reason for the incarnation. The Son of God became man so that he could die. We heard Athanasius say that on Friday, didn't we? Why did Jesus die? Well, he died so that he could go down to Hades, kick the devil's face in, and emerge victorious with the righteous dead from the whole human race. How amazing is that? Oh, that's pretty amazing. We call it the harrowing of hell. The terrorizing of hell. That's great, isn't it? We think of hell as like a place where humans go to be tortured. But actually, it's a place where Jesus tortures the devil. Like, he sorts the devil out. Jesus went into Hades, into death, into hell, we might say in the creed, to terrorize the devil and to free the captives. And that's what Jesus was doing between his death and resurrection. And I think with that piece of the puzzle, it makes so much more sense of the cross and the resurrection. Why did Jesus have to die? Well, because that's how you get into Hades. That's how you get into the grave. He died to go down into death. His very death was his assault on the gates of Hades. And therefore, once he'd beaten death, his resurrection was inevitable. It's like there was nothing else holding him down. So of course he's going to spring back up to life. How could he be held by something that has no power? Jesus has defeated death. This is the good news of Easter. That is the gospel. The gospel is simply the heralding of the good news that Jesus has had victory over sin, death, and the devil. Now, just as during the time of ancient Israel, the devil is still kind of trying to spin his propaganda today. Though in modern Britain, he no longer tells spiritual stories, because he knows we don't really go for that, like the Baal cycle. Instead, his propaganda is very much secular and material. So it's not a story where Baal is the hero. Usually it's a story where something like, science or technology is the hero. Because I wonder what you think of. Just think about this. What do you think of when you think of death? Because to us, death is, usually we think of it as just something that happens. Yeah? It's a condition. It's a medical reality. And so we're told that it's not as if death's out to get you. It's just a natural process. Things live and then they cease to live. In fact, we're told that if anything is going to defeat death, it's science. Not that it can undo death, but it can, maybe push back on it and push it back a bit. And we're told that it can find cures and fight diseases and all those things. That's the story the devil would have you believe. That death is just this kind of biological reality. But Jesus is telling us something very different in the words of Scripture. See, death is not just a condition. It's a reality. It's a power. It's a person who is out to get us, who wants to take us captive and take us away from Jesus. And no amount of medical advances can slay the demon creature of death. You see, death is not going to be reasoned with. We're not going to be able to sit down with death and kind of come to some legal agreement where it's like, well, if you take Jesus, if he takes our place, will you let me off? He's not a reasonable thing, death. He doesn't care if you're a good person. He just wants to eat you. And his appetite is insatiable. And so the only thing to be done was for Jesus to go down there and kill death, to fight this power. You see, Jesus' resurrection wasn't like a medical, biological marvel. It wasn't simply like the miracle of getting his heart to pump again, or getting his neurons to fire again. I think sometimes people think that, what happened was, Jesus kind of died, but if we'd been there with our modern technology, we could have, defibrillated him back to life. No. His victory wasn't over the biology of his body. It was over the monster of death. And this is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, "Death is swallowed up in victory. Oh, death, where is your victory? Oh, death, where is your sting?" It's a very popular reading at Easter, isn't it? But who is it speaking to? We so often skim over this and just kind of plug in our own definition and understanding of the words, and we think of death as medical or kind of medical or kind of conceptual terms. And so because Jesus has risen, this general idea of death is not to be feared. But where is Paul getting his understanding from? What does Paul mean when he writes this? Well, Paul is quoting another bit of the Bible from the Old Testament, from Hosea 13. And there it says, "O death, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your sting?" And you'll notice the words are a bit different. And in part, that's because translators have struggled a bit with translating Hosea 13 in the original Hebrew. Because the words in Hosea for death, plagues, Sheol, and sting are actually the names of Canaanite gods. But the translators made the choice to not translate them as proper names, but to translate them as the meaning of their names. So, for example, if my name were in an ancient text and was translated as the meaning of my name, it would not say Douglas Clark, it would say dark cleric or mysterious priest, right? So it would make no sense, would it? People wouldn't understand it's talking about a specific person. Like, and then the dark cleric arrived, and like, oh, who's this dark cleric? Yeah? And everyone's like, no, it's just Doug. It's just Douglas Clark. He's not really that mysterious, honestly. Yeah? And so they've done the same thing here. They've translated the meaning of these names rather than the names themselves. So if we would do our own translation, it would be something like this. I will ransom them from the hand of Sheol. I will redeem them from Moat. Oh, Moat, where is Debir? Oh, Sheol, where is Keteb? Okay? So who are these characters? Maybe we're more comfortable with the other translation because, we're more comfortable with impersonal powers and ideas. But by quoting Hosea, Paul is signaling that in his resurrection, Jesus has specifically defeated these characters and these powers. So who are they? Well, Sheol, we're probably quite familiar with. It's often translated in the New Testament as Hades. It is translated as the grave. It's the grave, but it's not just a place. It's also personified as a sort of creature with a great gaping mouth, swallowing up the dead. Then there is Moat. Moat, we've already heard about, is the Canaanite god of death. So Sheol and Moat are these creatures, these spiritual beings. And that makes sense then, doesn't it? Because Jesus is speaking to them. And he's like, Moat, where is Debir? Sheol, where is Keteb? So he's asking Moat and Sheol where these two other people are. Well, who are these two other people? Well, they are also these Canaanite gods of plague and pestilence, who are the servants of Moat, the servants of death. And at this point, we're getting really strong Revelation vibes, aren't we? Revelation 6:8. And I looked and beheld a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death. So Death's on the horse, and Hades, this beast, follows behind him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword and with famine and with plague and with pestilence. So Moat is riding this horse. He wants to feed his disgusting pet, Sheol, this beast with a monstrous mouth, and he does it by sending the boys round. He sends Keteb, and he sends Debir, and they're out. They're going to kill people. So Death can get hold of them and throw them into the mouth of Sheol. But in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 5, we read that Debir and Keteb, plague and pestilence, are actually under Yahweh's control, under Jesus' control. It is Jesus, the God of Israel, who has control even over pestilence and plague. So the idea here in Hosea, when we piece it together with Habakkuk, and we need to really read the whole Bible to get this view, don't we? Is that God has disarmed the God of death. These weapons that he's brought along to the fight that he thought he had have been taken away from him. And actually, Jesus controls them. And so in Hosea, and this is what Paul's quoting, Jesus is kind of taunting the devil, taunting death. Hey, Death, where's your boy Debir? Where is he? Oh, look, he's over here with me. What are you going to do about it? Oh, and where's Keteb? Oh, look, he's here too. What are you going to do about it? Yeah? Death is disarmed. The cross is Jesus' door into death. When Sheol saw that death, when the grave saw that death had killed Jesus, and he just saw him hanging there on the cross, he couldn't help himself. Sheol was so hungry for humans, it's insatiable, and so he swallows up the man full of life, and he gobbles him down into the grave. But what he didn't realize is that Jesus, this human, was different. For although he had a mortal body, it was none other than the Spirit of God himself. And death cannot hold life. And so Jesus, being life itself, ripped a hole in the belly of the beast so that the contents of his hellish stomach spilled out. He has put a hole in the side of the grave. He has smashed the brass gates of Satan's palace to pieces. Death is no longer solid and inescapable. It's leaky and bleeding, and there is a way out for all who would follow Jesus. If we follow Jesus into death, then he brings us straight out of the hole that he has made and right into his presence. Jesus is the door out of death. John 10:9. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved. John 14:6, Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If we are filled with the life of Jesus, if we have his Spirit, we go down to death, it can no longer hold us either. The cross was Jesus' way in, and the resurrection was his way out. We will all die. Death is after us, and it will get us. But it cannot hold us if we follow Jesus. We too can share in his resurrection. Satan did everything he could to plate up Jesus for death. He goes to Judas, he turns him. He goes to religious leaders, he turns the crowds against him. He did everything. He's like giddy. He's like, oh, we're going to get Jesus, we've done it now. And he thought bringing Jesus down to Hades, down to Sheol, would be like his crowning achievement. What he didn't realize is that actually it would be his very undoing. You see, when we ask what Easter is about, most people think of chocolate eggs and Easter bunnies and spring flowers. But really, Easter's about demon slaying. It is. It's about Jesus defeating the demons and all the evil things that would come against you and try to hurt you. Christ is victor, Christ has won, Christ has the victory. And do you know what that means? It means whatever your worst nightmare is, Jesus has defeated it. There is nothing scary left in the world for Christians. There is nothing scary left in the world for those who have been baptized and who are trusting Jesus and following him, who are in church and who claim his name and are covered by his blood. We're scared of things, aren't we? We're scared of dying. We're scared of people we love dying. We don't need to be, because Jesus has defeated death. We're scared of our own sin. We're scared of those things that we do that we just can't seem to stop doing. We can't escape those addictions and those passions and those behaviors. And we're like, oh, I'll never escape. I'll never be able to stop doing it. And Jesus is like, I've killed that demon. I've killed it. You're free if you follow me. Boys and girls, are we sometimes a bit scared of the dark? Yeah? We're a bit scared of monsters. But you know what? With Jesus around, none of the monsters dare come near you. They're scared. So call out to him for help and he'll just turn up and kill him. Jesus has defeated every demon. Jesus has defeated our doubt. That lie when the devil comes, he's like, are you really? Are you enough? Is Jesus enough? This is what he's been doing from the garden. We can talk about the Baal cycle, but he's been doing it from the garden. Did Jesus really say? And you can say, yes, he did. Yes, he did. He has done it. You're a liar. And I know you're trying to tell me the propaganda, but Jesus has risen. And I trust him. And even if I sometimes really struggle with that, I'm just going to claim the name of Jesus. I'm going to pray to him. I'm going to call out to him in this moment, and the devil will flee. The resurrection isn't just, oh good, my fine has been paid. It's all the demons lay dead at my feet, and I can walk this world without fear, because death has been defeated. Job is probably the oldest book in the Bible. It's not the first one we read, but Job was probably written well before Genesis, about 400, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's the oldest book in the Bible. And Job faces many evils. You know the story of Job. Death comes for him, it comes for his family like really hard. kills all his family, tries to kill him. Death terrorizes Job. But what is Job able to say, like literally hundreds of years before Jesus is born? He says, "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed," so after I've died, "yet in my flesh I will see him." There will be resurrection. "I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me." Tell yourself that today. Whatever's going on, whatever lies, whenever the devil comes against you, say, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and although I die, I will stand with him in my flesh because of his death, his victory over death, and his resurrection. Christ is risen. He's risen indeed." Hallelujah.